You're watching Script Tease. In today's episode, we'll be looking at how to write a romance screenplay by examining Call Me By Your Name. You can expect spoilers, mature language, and adult themes. Romance films often get shoved into the chick flicks box, something for gal pals to watch together with a box of tissues on the coffee table. But romance has something that many other films simply don't: universal appeal. No matter where you come from, where you live, or what you do, everyone can understand and empathize with feeling love. Whether you're including romance as a subplot to bolster your action or comedy film, or whether you're writing an out-and-out romantic romp, you can go for it knowing that a well-crafted romance can rope in any viewer. Now, admittedly, I may not be the best teacher of the language of love. If romance was karate, I'd be like a green belt, maybe. You should see my grips though. Anyway, even a novice has some insight to provide. In this case, I can see how the romance genre provides an excellent template for all the screenwriting qualities we've previously discussed. Chief among these is conflict. As discussed previously, conflict occurs when the protagonist encounters obstacles that stand in the way of their objective. Here's the beautiful thing about romance films though: the obstacle and the objective are usually the same thing: the love interest. It's like a ready-made recipe for drama, people. The love interest is both the object of the protagonist's affection and the person they must overcome, as it were. To win the love interest's heart, the protagonist must change. It's deliciously economical in its design. Of course, then the question is, what is keeping the two people apart? Studio Binder has a great video about the meet cute, in which they outline the 4 major types of romantic encounters, based on who's the pusher and who's the puller. You should check out their whole video, but the key takeaway is that romance relies upon each person either showing interest or hiding interest. There's an ebb and flow to the relationship, and it's exactly that back and forth that any romantic story, let alone a romantic screenplay, should capitalize on. Today we're going to be looking at Call Me By Your Name, a film which perfectly exemplifies this push-pull analogy. The film depicts Elio, a teenager living in Italy with his archaeologist father, who realizes his romantic feelings for his father's graduate student, Oliver, who has come to work as an assistant for the summer. It's not only a romance, it's also a coming-of-age film, in which Elio learns to embrace his sexuality by fumbling through his first true romance. Let's see how the screenplay for Call Me By Your Name captures this story of young love. For any romantic story in which the two characters aren't instantly infatuated with one another, there has to be some external force pushing them together. In the case of Call Me By Your Name, Oliver is not only living with Elio for 6 weeks, he's also staying in an adjoining room. This means their nighttime comings and goings are plain to see, and, even as they lie in bed, they know the other is just a few meters away. It keeps them on each other's minds, and always interacting. For example, when the pair are too bashful or awkward to capitalize on their affections, this proximity can bring them together. When Elio starts touching himself while thinking of Oliver, Oliver bursts in unwittingly. Elio then sees Oliver naked as he's getting changed to go for a swim, further intriguing him. By complete accident, this first sexual barrier is broken, which further deepens Elio's interest. Once the two are forced together, the drama comes in how the protagonist and their love interest play off one another. When Elio pursues his love of Oliver, he doesn't straight out confess it. After all, people are rarely so straightforward in their intentions. He instead awkwardly scopes out Oliver's interest in Chiara by trying to set them up. He comments on how attractive Chiara is, which confuses and irritates Oliver.
Just don't play at being a good host.
Of course, we the audience guess this is because Oliver likes Elio back, but Elio is oblivious. The sexual tension is obvious in the script though. While talking, their bare legs briefly collide. Another case of the two characters pushing one another away comes after Elio and Oliver first kiss. Oliver seemingly ignores Elio, going to parties all night and coming back late. This push from Oliver causes Elio to become jealous, and so he reignites his interest with Marzia as a kind of revenge, showing that he too can get attention. Of course, the very fact that Elio is doing this demonstrates that he is, in actuality, in love with Oliver. He's taking his actions with Marzia only to push back against Oliver, to make him jealous in return. He then rubs it in Oliver's face, the same way he feels Oliver is doing to him. It creates this vicious cycle of jealousy and revenge that can only be broken by someone extending an olive branch. In this case, Elio caves to his love for Oliver and writes him a note.
Can't stand the silence. I need to speak to you.
Up until this scene of Oliver writing the note, however, all of this jealousy is subtext. Knowing that Alio loves Oliver, we understand that his fling with Marcia has nothing to do with his affection for her. Because there is so much subtext in any romantic encounter, a romance screenplay has to lean on ambiguous sentences to spark the reader's imagination. By ambiguous sentences, I mean those that refer to a vague glance, a shared look, a small touch or mannerism which by itself carries no meaning, but when coupled with another moment, takes on new meaning. We have to rely on the actor to carry off these moments. After all, the on-screen chemistry of the two actors is paramount in creating a believable romance. With these small moments, how do you possibly try to capture that in text? You can't say, Alio looks 1.63mm above Oliver's right eye, then switches to the left eye, locking on to the tear duct. That'd be weird. Kinda awesome actually, but still mostly weird. So instead, you leave a line which implies something. Maybe it's infatuation, or jealousy, or doubt, but you can imply all of these with a quick look away, or indulging in a stare a little bit longer than usual. Is it a lingering touch, implying that the person wants more, or is it an abrupt pat on the back, almost condescending? Ultimately, the most minor actions will come down to the two actors trying to get inside the characters and letting their bodies take over from there. So as the screenwriter, your job is to give them a moment to do that with an ambiguous sentence. Take for example this moment between Marcia and Alio on the dance floor. There is a strange energy and exchange of glances between them. Though the meaning of this glance isn't explicitly stated, we understand that Alio's attention is being pulled from Oliver to Marcia. While he might have affection for Marcia, he's not infatuated with her like he is with Oliver. And so this creates some awkwardness, as Alio both tries to buoy his own spirits by dancing, while also settling for his second choice. But as I've just demonstrated by spelling all that out in excruciating detail, writing all of that subtext is hardly efficient, so instead we use a single sentence. This pops up in dialogue too, when a character can't quite bring themselves to speak their true thoughts. When Alio confesses his love to Oliver, he does so with the vague sentiment,
If you only knew how little I know about the things that matter.
Of course, in this case, the ambiguity draws not only our curiosity, but Oliver's as well. Even after Alio and Oliver have sex for the first time, we get this ambiguous sentence use. Relenting, he smiles back at Oliver for the first time, though he wishes at that moment for Oliver to be miles away. We don't understand just yet why Alio's feelings are so mixed. We're forced to make our own assumptions or project our own feelings and previous experiences onto the film. And in that moment, we've connected with the characters whether our assumptions were right or not. Alternatively, instead of ambiguity, we can use silence to get across the same message. As we all know, much of romance takes place inside our minds while we're alone, thinking of the other person. A couple of scenes in Call Me By Your Name use this technique, showing how Alio obsesses over Oliver in his private moments. When Oliver is out partying, Alio waits up all night for him to come home. He has left the bathroom door intentionally ajar, hoping that the light from the foyer might stream in just enough to reveal his body. He jumps back in his bed, pretending to be asleep. But when he does, Oliver goes to the toilet and then, somewhat roughly, shuts Alio's door. Alio holds this against Oliver, even though Oliver has absolutely no idea what he's done wrong. It makes absolutely no sense, but hey, that's love for you. There's also another perfect example of this silence technique when Alio is by himself with the peach, but you'll just have to watch that for yourself, because Lord knows I'm not touching it with a 10-foot pole. Let's get away from that topic as quick as possible. The romantic progression of a story is vital, slowly ramping up the relationship until it hits the inevitable climax. My apologies. At first, the romance is from afar. A surefire way to know if someone is interested in another person is to see who they watch. If someone has captured our attention, we're bound to watch them more closely. How they talk to other people, their mannerisms, how they hold themselves, it all becomes magnified by our infatuation. After just meeting Oliver, Alio can't take his eyes off him. Alio realizes he's staring at Oliver. He lowers his eyes. During the volleyball match, we see Alio's not the only interested party. All eyes are on Oliver, the glamorous American. Of course, perhaps the most voyeuristic moment is when Alio watches on as Oliver dances with Kiara. Alio watches them dancing, thinks he'd give anything to be in her shoes. The mere fact that Alio can't take his eyes away from Oliver is a sure sign of his burgeoning affection. These small glances then turn into small movements, with each touch growing increasingly more familiar and sexual. When Oliver first touches Alio near the start of the film to give him a massage, Alio reacts with shock. Alio, taken by surprise, is spellbound for an instant, yielding to Oliver's hand, even leaning into it. Then he wrenches himself away from Oliver's grab. But as they move towards their first kiss, these small touches escalate. After finally confessing his feelings to Oliver, the two ride down to Alio's secret spot. You can make your own joke here. Alio holds Oliver's stare, and it's the acknowledgement in the action text that this is the first time he's done so that makes this action all the more important. Alio has finally gone on the offensive. He's taking actions towards Oliver instead of observing from afar. Listen to the minutiae of the action here. Oliver touches Alio's lower lip with his finger, lets it travel left and right, then right and left again. Oliver smiles at Alio as he lies there, and that very smile fills Alio with a kind of apprehension about what will happen next. Oliver's kiss meets Alio halfway, but it's Alio who then kisses back fully, losing himself. Push-pull, the two don't just give in straight away. There's always a back and forth of interest between the two of them, a kind of probing, if you will. Of course, the backdrop of a romance film can be just as important as the starring characters. Set in rural Italy during summertime, Call Me By Your Name abounds with images that call forth romance and eroticism, and the screenplay capitalizes on this with action text that pulls on the surrounds to capture the emotion of the moment. Water, for example, represents natural sexual desire. When characters get wet, yes, the analogy here is painfully obvious, it accompanies the characters giving in to desire. Alio and Oliver swimming together deepens their bond and allows them to spend more time together. Alio goes skinny dipping with Marzia to give in to his sexual desires. When Alio is trying to hold back his desire for Oliver, he sits inside, out of the pouring rain. Then, when he has his kiss with Oliver, it's in the river. And of course, when Alio and Oliver take their 3-day trip away, they run into the mist being thrown off the waterfall, fully giving in to their love while they call each other's names. Being set in the summer, the clothing is also loose and carefree, making it quite sexual. When watching someone from afar, the clothes leave their body to the imagination. When kissing, the clothes are a thin barrier between skin touching skin, the last barrier waiting to be torn off. Of course, when Alio and Oliver first have sex then, it's no surprise that Oliver delights so much in taking off his clothes. Additionally, clothes take on a person's scent and help us recall that person. Alio indulges in Oliver's shorts by sniffing them, putting his head inside them. Personally, I find this kind of scene hard to watch, but when you actually feel that infatuated with someone, it's raw. You can't help yourself. Maybe you have a jumper of theirs that you love the smell of, for example. It's embarrassing from afar, but that's exactly because it's so primal, so instinctual in the moment. Oliver's blue shirt also acts as a memento of him. It reminds Alio of his laid-back nature, how casually he was able to gain people's affections. Ultimately, for the romance to succeed, at least one character needs to change. Alio's denial of his sexuality prevents him from openly pursuing Oliver. When he hears the story of the princess and the knight, one line sticks out to him. Is it better to speak or die? This pushing prompt gives Alio the courage to confess his feelings to Oliver, embrace his true identity. Similarly, the quote from Heraclitus speaks to Alio needing to reveal his identity in order to embrace his love for Oliver.
The meaning of the river flowing is not that all things are changing so that we cannot encounter them twice, but that some things stay the same only by changing.
This quote is a beautiful analogy for the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell's story structure in which the hero returns to their original state, but having changed through their adventure. In this case, Alio always loved men, but by encountering Oliver, he's able to accept this side of himself and change in the process. His love stays the same by his motivation changing. Romance scripts require a leap of faith on the part of the screenwriter. You're essentially creating the scenario, the characters, the setting, and then dropping onto this template a kind of voyeuristic outlook. You're watching the two characters circle one another, growing ever closer, pushing one another away only to be pulled back in again by love and lust. You're trying to capture the hormonal rush of passion and jealousy, but to do so, you need to lean back a little bit and allow the actors to do their job. Give the actors space to play, leave the ambiguity in, because at the end of the day, romance isn't a cut and dry pursuit. Good writing and good luck.